Well, hi there, this is Scott Duffy from GetCloudSkills.com. In this video, we're going to create a Windows virtual machine that we can log into, remote desktop into, control, and install whatever software we wish using Microsoft Azure. First, I'm going to assume that you have a Microsoft Azure account that you have access to. If you don't, you can go to azure.microsoft.com/free and you can create a free account. When you do create a free account, Microsoft will give you a couple of $100 in credits for 30 days, plus you'll get 2 virtual machines, one Linux and one Windows, that you can use for 12 months for free. And so you go ahead and try this for free if you don't already have an Azure account. But I'm going to assume that you have one, you've logged into your account. We're just going to step right into it, go into create a resource. It's always this green plus sign here on the top left. If you're on the home page, there's also create a resource button. We can see a virtual machine staring at us right here, but you can even get more specific and create a Windows Server 2019 data center virtual machine. It's the same thing, whether you create this or that, it's basically the same process. So I'm going to click create under 2019 server. All resources must exist in a resource group. I create a new resource group just because it makes it easier to delete after, makes it easier to clean up and remove all your resources. I should mention the subscription. If you have multiple subscriptions, you should choose the correct one. You have a free account, a pay-as-you-go account, etc. Now, most resources need to be named. And in this case, the name does not have to be unique. It just has to be unique for the resource group. So I'm just going to call this new VM. Now, one of the determining factors for the choices you're going to make later is what region of the world you want your virtual machine to exist in. Now, for me, it's recommending East US 2 by default, and for you, it might be different. But if you choose this drop-down, you're going to see that there are dozens and dozens of regions around the world, including Korea and India, Australia, Canada, United States, Europe, many different regions around the world that you can choose from. Okay, I'm going to put this in North Europe. Now you'll see here right away that depending on the region that you choose, the virtual machine instance type may not be available. So if you absolutely require this D2SV3, then you're going to have to choose something other than North Europe. A lot of the really common ones are going to be in all regions, but there's going to be some specialized hardware specific to certain regions. As well, pricing can be different. Okay, so in terms of choosing a virtual machine, depending on the region, I'm going to see different prices. So I'm going to go back to East US 2, and I can see the price drop from $187 a month to $175 a month just by changing to the region. Now, by default, Microsoft Azure is pretty good at keeping your virtual machines running. And so if you don't need this availability options, that's perfectly fine. For a single virtual machine, you're not going to have many choices. But if you needed to have multiple virtual machines, you may want to take particular attention to how they're deployed, whether you use availability zones, which allows you to place virtual machines into specific data centers, and then you can physically separate your resources even within East US 2, or availability set in which you just trust Microsoft to separate your resources. You notify them, these are the resources that need to be separated, and they'll do that. For this single virtual machine, I don't require that. Now, we did choose the Windows Server 2019 data center. We can change our mind at this point if we wanted to go to Ubuntu, or we wanted to go to an older version of Windows. We have all sorts of choices under this drop box, or see all images. I'm going to leave it as Server 2019. Now, the spot instance option is interesting because it allows you to create a virtual machine at a discounted price. Basically, you're taking the availability if there is availability for you. Once Microsoft runs out of availability, someone else comes along, they're going to basically shut you down. So this is sort of a standby seat on an airplane. You're going to be able to get that seat 75% of the time, and then some percent of the time you may not be the priority. They'll kick you off the plane. So spot instance is a good way to save money, but we're not going to use it for now. Now, besides the region and the operating system, one of your first big choices has to be on the hardware on which you're running. So I'm going to say see all sizes. Now I have East US 2 region, and it's giving me tons of recommendations. I can see the pricing here. I can see the RAM, the number of virtual CPUs, number of data disks that can be attached, and IO per second and things like that, the size of the C drive. So we saw in the free tier that B1S was the free option. You'll see that it's 1 CPU, 1 gigabyte of RAM, 2 data disks. This is a very slow machine. It's very cheap, mind you, $13 a month, but it's not going to be very fast. Don't expect your free virtual machines to be extremely powerful. So let's go up to the B2 option, which is twice the size, obviously, 2 CPUs, 4 gigabytes of RAM instead of just the 1. If you want the M option, there's an additional bunch of memory, and you can see the pricing is still very reasonable. So I'm going to choose B2MS. It's a good, relatively cheap virtual machine, good for playing around, not going to be too slow, but not necessarily overloaded. The B in this stands for burstable, and that means the performance can be bursted to higher performance, and then it goes back down to lower performance. It's if you need sustainable high performance, this is not the option for you. All right, so I chose a relatively small but reasonably sized machine. Now, Windows machines, in this case, use a user ID and password for administration. So this is what we're going to use to log into the machine. When we get a chance to log in, which we'll do at the end of this, you're going to enter a user ID and password that you can remember, and then when we remote desktop into it, you'll use this to log in. Now, in order for remote desktop to work, we need to allow that traffic, which is port 3389, to pass through the network rules. If you wanted to run a web server, you would want to have port 80 and port 443 to pass through those network traffic as well. SSH is a secure shell protocol usually used for Linux. So if you had a Linux operating system, you wouldn't open the RDP port, you'd probably open the SSH port. Now, Windows has an option for you to use what is called hybrid benefit. And hybrid benefit could save you up to 50%. So we're seeing this as $85 a month. And if I choose hybrid benefit, which it might not even, it goes down to $77. So such a small server, it can't save you that much. But on the much bigger servers, you're gonna see it could be 20, 30, or 40% savings if you already have an existing Windows license. And you have to double confirm here that you are eligible to use an existing server license in your enterprise to use it for this. So I'm not going to do that. Now, we saw when we were setting up the B2S server that we had these concepts, both temporary disk storage, which is your operating system disk, and also the data disk, which you can add as additional D, E, F, G letter disks. Okay. There is a quantity limit per instance. And this option is giving me the premium solid state disk as the default. If I use standard solid state or hard disk, I could save some money, obviously, but it wouldn't be as performant. It would be basically a slower performance. When you delete the virtual machine, you don't want this C drive to stick around, so that's fine too. The other option we have is to take control of the encryption. So by default, our VHD, our virtual hard disk, within Azure will be encrypted as it's written to the disk, but the platform, which is Azure, controls the security key. I could require that I control the security key. I would use a Azure key vault in order to set this up. The other option is to do both platform and customer, so double encrypted, which is even more secure. Okay. Ultra disk is a very fast option for hard disks, right? Costs more, obviously, and you'd have to be deployed to availability zones. Now, that's for the operating system disk. For the data disk, you can create additional data disks that the machine can use to write its data to, and that would be usually kept when you delete the VM. And you can see that when you do create it, you can optionally choose to have that data disk deleted. But let's say you have a lot of data on a virtual machine and you want to transfer that data to another virtual machine. You could use these data disks as a way to attach to one, copy your data to that, and then detach it and then attach it to the other. So data disks or you can move them around between virtual machines. Now, all virtual machines must exist on a virtual network. You can either have an existing virtual network or you can create a new one in this wizard here. And you can see it's giving me a brand new virtual machine. It's named it by default. It's chosen an IP address range with 24 bits of addressing, which is the most significant digit, I believe, 10.0.0.0 to 10.0.0.255. It's also creating a public IP address. That means I can access the machine from the public internet. I need this for the remote desktop. I'm going to leave the security defaults here. Remember, we already chose the inbound ports, and it's just a second choice of choosing these inbound ports. Maybe I want all that other stuff to be deleted when the VM is deleted. This is relatively new, and I'm going to turn that on. This particular VM doesn't support something called accelerated networking. Accelerated networking is great when you have very powerful, high-performance computers that need to talk to each other, send data back and forth as part of batch processing or running very powerful programs. And basically, Microsoft has created a new type of networking technology that is much faster and bypasses the traditional model where they had a NIC card connecting to a virtual network within their system. So this is not valid for the B1 protocol. We could also put this machine as part of an existing load balancer, which we don't have, which we won't use. Microsoft has this Azure Security Center has increased in importance within Azure as a centralized dashboard for you to control security across your account. And there is a free level of Azure Security Center, so this subscription does get covered by that. Maybe, I don't know if the free subscription doesn't. Typically, I turn off boot diagnostics unless I really have an intention. If this booting of this machine ever failed, would I ever want to look at the boot logs? And probably not. 99.999% I would never look at the boot logs. So no sense having this turned on. The OS guest diagnostics is actually the performance metrics of the Windows machine itself. You know, Windows has these performance counters, CPU, memory, disk, and there's probably, I would guess there's about 70 or 80 or 90 different performance options. You can get that stuff to be pushed into a storage account within Azure, and then you can connect that to Azure Monitor and you can download those files, etc. So this is an interesting option which I'll turn on. We could have our account running under what's called a managed identity. So right now I've created an administrator user ID and password, and there's no permissions and things like that. Virtual machine does not have permission to do much. If I created it under managed identity would exist within Azure Active Directory, and then you can start to assign additional permissions to it. We're not going to go down this route. We're not going to go into our back authentication. We're using Windows authentication, as we said, user administrator, user ID, and password, and we're not going to use Azure AD login just yet. We can do that in the future. I always like this auto shutdown option because sometimes I forget. Remember, this machine here is about $80 a month, which is about $2.25 per day. Still, you don't want to forget, right? You don't want to go a week and leave this running. You've never logged in the second time. So having this shut down automatically is the sort of that backstop, a fail-safe to make sure you're not running up the costs on your account. I don't need notification for that. Now, a recent addition to this wizard is the ability to enable the daily backups of this machine into a recovery services vault. And so I could turn on here, it would create a vault for me. It would create a policy, which I would then have to create my own policy, and I could choose the options for how often it's backing up and how much time it keeps, etc. The other related element of site is site recovery. Now, site recovery is the ability to move from the region. So if I'm in if there's a disaster in East US 2 and the whole region is down, then this is, again, it's a disaster. Well, site recovery would allow me to restore this machine in a different region, which could be West US. And so if I was to enable this, I would be able to, in this case, it's East US, but I could choose West US 2. I have to say that doesn't have that type of virtual machine. So I would have to choose one where it does, and it would create the same network in there, the same resource group, but it would not create the virtual machine until the disaster happened. So this is a cold recovery where you'd have to enable this failover, and then the new machine would get spun up in East US. So there would be some downtime and there might be some data loss. I'm not going to do that. Guest operating system updates. Windows Server 2022 allows idea of hot patching, which allows Microsoft to auto update your machine without rebooting it. So critical and security updates do not require restarts, which is something that you could enable. And without this hot patching, when I do have the Windows automatic updates, Windows sometimes forces a reboot. You'll come back to your computer after the weekend and the computer has rebooted itself. And that's because you've got automatic updates. So far, pretty good. Now this video is going a bit longer, but in reality, you would go a lot faster with creating this. We did enable the guest OS agent in here, so we don't need to do any other extensions. We don't have to pass any data, like if we had a startup script and needed to pass some sort of data. There's also user data option. If we used Azure Dedicated Hosts, which is hardware that you can provision that is entirely provisioned for your benefit, no other Azure customers would ever use it. This is a highly secure option, but also an expensive option. We could be creating this virtual machine in our dedicated host group. Capacity reservations allows you to reserve capacity, and you're basically reserving it ahead of time so that we can create a VM. We're not going to create it now, we'll create it in the future, but let's create a reservation, and there's obviously a cost for that. Proximity placement is sort of the opposite of the availability set. Availability set, you want the machines to be placed apart for redundancy so that one power supply goes, one rack goes, hard drive fails, that all of your virtual machines aren't affected. Proximity placement places them close together so that you get higher performance. If you need your machines communicating, you want them as physically close together as possible so that they have the fastest communication between them. And we're not going to do any of this. Now, tagging hasn't changed in years, but it's basically a way of setting some metadata. So if I had this concept of a billing code or who created it, so if I wanted my name associated with this, each person in your company could put their name against the virtual machine that they created, etc. All right, so we go to the review tab finally, and Microsoft is going to just put together all of the options that we chose. They're going to give us a pricing. So you can see here we're running about $2 a day, 11 cents per minute for the B2MS server, one of them. It's doing some validation to make sure that all of our choices logically make sense. We didn't skip any fields. Validation passed. And we did, remember, open some RDP ports. So when I hit create, Microsoft is going to go provision this machine for us in the East US 2 region. And I'm going to pause the video. When we come back, we will have a running virtual machine that we can remote into and prove to ourselves that we have a working virtual machine. So I'll just pause the video for that. So that deployment actually was pretty quick. if we look at the resources that were created, we should see that they created a bunch of things for us. We got our virtual machine, but we also had our network interface. We had virtual networks, public IP address, the security group. So if we look at the virtual machine itself, it was created, the B2MS was created in only 28 seconds. Microsoft has really gotten good at creating these resources quickly. We can see there's the backup because I turned on backup, and the diagnostics that had to be created for that. All right, yeah, basically this is our entire deployment. Now, if I click the Go to Resource, I will be taken to this virtual machine. I can also get to it from the home page. You'll see right off the top, Recent Resources, it's under New VMs. I can also go under the virtual machine icon or under All Services. I'm going to have to refresh here. Oh, I have to change my subscription. Thank you. And we can see that in this new RG 2022, we have our virtual machine that we just created. It's been given a public IP address. Let's go under monitoring here. Now, Microsoft is tracking the CPU utilization. We can see here that it spiked for a little bit under startup. It's now running around 20%. We should expect that to come back down. Once all the startup actions have been taken, we can see spikes here. The machine is alive. Now, in order to connect to the machine, it's really simple. Microsoft makes it easy. You just go to the Connect menu at the top here, and there's this RDP option. RDP option is going to give me the RDP file that download to my computer that will allow me to connect to this IP address. So I just need to go to my downloads folder or click the file right off the status bar here, and our remote desktop starts. And I do have to approve this connection, which I do approve, obviously. Now, the real tricky part is the logging in, because you're logged into Windows on your own machine under one account, but whatever you created in the username and password is completely different to what you created for your own account. So this is hidden under this More Choices, and you have to say use a different account. So this is a Windows process. If you've got a Mac, there is an RDP for Mac. Obviously, the process is going to be different. So remember, we created a user ID and password. The time that we created the credentials. So I put that in there. Hopefully I remembered it, and I'm going to say OK. Now I do have to connect, prove the security certificate. And so I would say, yes, I want to connect because I created the machine. I trust it. And now here we go. This is the first time logging into the Windows server, and it has to create me a user profile, which is pretty standard for the first time. It'll be quicker the second time we do it. There are also, with these Windows images, some startup stuff, like so this option to allow your PC to be discoverable by other networks, other PCs on the network. I'm going to say no to this. And there should be a server manager. There it is. That starts up so I can add the IIS software, the web server, the whatever software I needed to add from a Windows perspective. I could do that using Server Manager. Otherwise, I can shut this down. I can say add rules and features. Oh, it's going to take a second here to start. All right, so startup is complete. And if I did want to turn this into a web server, I could do that really easily by the add roles feature. So I go next, 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 and then I choose the web server role for this machine. I accept the features that get added. Of course, there are other types of servers, Active Directory if you need, etc. Web server is going to be the most common thing here. And it's just pretty quick to accept these. There might be some features that you particularly think that you need, but you can just say install. I think this is, yeah, it says this can be closed without interrupting it. So we can turn this into a web server pretty easily. And that's it. We have a server. We can do whatever we want with it. We can turn it into a web server. We can install software, install a different browser. We can do lots of things with this server because it's ours to control. If I ever wanted to disconnect from this Windows Remote Desktop takes up the full screen here, and I could disconnect using the power shutdown. Or I could minimize this and get back to my computer. Okay. Now, the last bit here is that this machine is running, and I am going to be charged against my account, at least, as long as this runs. Remember, it was 11 cents per hour. And so at some point, I might want to stop this machine, stop it from running. And at another point, I might want to delete this machine if I don't need it anymore. It's taking up storage. Remember, I told you in the very beginning that resource groups are convenient because you can use them to delete everything. And so if you wanted to delete this, you just go into the resource group and say delete resource group, type in the name, hit delete, and all of these things will be deleted. So that's as easy as it is to create a Windows virtual machine in Microsoft Azure in 2022. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the video comment section. Hit the like button. Love you guys. Thank you so much. Hit the subscribe to get more videos like this. If you have some ideas for future videos, let me know. I'm going to start creating videos for this channel again, and I look forward to seeing you again.